addressing us about issues in the modern world that are very disturbing to a lot of us, and very happy to welcome you to the stream and also to the recording. And I think without further ado, I don't think Sarah needs any introduction. She is an incredible veteran of the good fight from way back when, as everyone knows. And so she's very, very knowledgeable, as we all know. And this is streaming. There will be more people coming, so don't let that bother you if the thing rings and so forth. And I'm sorry for the delay in getting going. And also bear with us as people ring the bell, okay? So without further ado, there's a 10 or so here. Let's give Sarah a welcome, okay? Sara Flounders, journalist, investigative journalist extraordinaire, and activist. Okay. Okay, take it away,
Harold, come here.
Okay, I'm coming. Go ahead, sir.
Should we give it a minute?
What's happening? Okay, so go ahead, Sarah, you can start. Come in, tight focus on with her.
All right.
Go ahead.
Well, I really thought that tonight we could...
It's still broadcasting.
I think I'm going to give this a minute.
They didn't stop it. Is it?
Hold on.
You go check it. I think it's going.
It's that light, see bright
Okay.
that
Yeah. It's broadcasting.
I want to hear this.
You're on, sir.
Okay.
Well, I just want Harold to be able to get off the phone, just so
I'm sorry, honey. They're trying to make sure they're in Virginia, making sure the stream's coming through. That's
Okay, so I'll wait until you know.
Okay, it's going. Go.
Okay.
Fine. Everything's
All right.
fine. Way up.
Okay, good evening. I was really hoping that tonight we could have a discussion about what is really new and different, and talk a bit about the issues that Occupy Wall Street has raised in the U.S. today and around the world. Because I think if it's exciting here, you can picture what it is in countries around the world where people are looking with such excitement that finally there's a movement bubbling up here, and finally there's some anger at the complete lawlessness at the way in which U.S. corporate domination has impacted around the world, but also finding it impacts here. It's only when there's a political movement here that people around the world, rather than see this as a homogeneous mass arrayed against them, wakes up also to the idea that there really is a 1% who benefits globally and largely based here. The very term and the idea of saying 1% and that we are the 99, you know, it's worth looking at that because the 99 is divided, of course, in all kinds of ways. You really have to take into account all the questions of racism and division in this society if you're going to talk about the 99%. But the focus on the 1% and the banks is extremely important, and it's a really new development to have thousands and tens of thousands of people in the streets in illegal occupations that are not one march, not something going on a day, a few days. It's now going into the 8th week, and that is pretty incredible. And it's not only in New York and Oakland and some major cities. There's more than 100 cities around the country where there's occupations in some form or another going on. And that is a pretty incredible development. And it is really having a far greater problem it represents for U.S. corporate power than they're even telling us. It worries them in very profound ways because they're never used to their power, their domination, their control being challenged in any way whatsoever. So you have tens of thousands of people both challenging their domination and really challenging the rules of property and everything from the traffic rules to where people can stop to these takeovers and encampments of refusing to apply for permits in marching. in doing all kinds of actions and defending again and again these occupations. It's brought new forces into the movement in ways that is also very new and exciting. Every attempt to shut down the occupation, such as we saw in New York, I think it was the third week of the occupations when there was an arrest of, I don't know, it was more than 100 people outside of just past Union Square. Big demonstrations against that. Followed a week later with a mass arrest of more than 700 people on the Brooklyn Bridge, a completely staged arrest by the New York Police Department, where they actually led people onto the bridge and then mass arrested them. The response to that was a far larger demonstration, the largest one yet, tens of thousands of people. Then there was going to be an effort to clean the park, as they called it, clean the park, by Mayor Bloomberg. And again, thousands and really tens of thousands of people showed out to pack the park. Being down there in the pouring rain all night and seeing thousands and thousands of people come to not only was the square but the streets around surrounded. And something which was unknown, I think, in our experience was the AFL-CIO putting out a mass email and text to their entire membership saying to everyone possible, go to Zuccotti Park. When has such a thing happened before? So these are really big developments. I think we saw last week in Oakland, after a really vicious police attack, mass arrests, collapsing the tent. Scott Olson, an Iraq vet who had done 2 tours without injury, comes back here and is fighting for his life after being hit with a police projectile. That really generated also enormous anger, and this time a far more organized response from labor to shut down the docks, and also the teachers coming out, the schools closing, students marching in the thousands, city workers, and then the city council actually saying people didn't have to go to work. Everything to make it appear not a strike, because it was clear people weren't going to show up. And also folks found many ways around it, saying they were taking it as a personal day, a holiday, but they weren't going to work. When has there been a general strike? And this is about the closest to it we have seen in decades, in several generations. So these are really important developments. And once it begins, as we can see also from what's happening in Europe, this is also something which may well go through stages. This is the first wave, really, of a growing and new consciousness here in the U.S., a growing challenge. And I think it's worth us looking at from all different points of view, but the idea that the banks can continue to, what were they trying to do? Capitalism is truly at a dead end. It is unable to solve its problems. It is unable, and there is no perspective of providing employment for millions of people. And as a matter of fact, they want their system bailed out again and again and again, with no hope of solving the problems that corporate America, the corporations have, the banks have. There's no hope of doing that. So what do they want? They want trillions of dollars. It's about $20 trillion already, simply like a blank check handed over to the banks. And now with this secret committee that's been meeting in Congress, what do they want to do? They want to lay hold of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, just about every social entitlement program. I mean, these are programs that working people have paid into for generations, and there's a real effort to just steal it wholesale. Yeah. So this has to be really challenged. And we have to also be looking at the occupations with a point of view of how to make demands. Going back to Frederick Douglass, who said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, it never will. And the demand of the government for a massive jobs program, the demand for canceling of student debts. I mean, young people today graduate school, graduate college, university, and they are really in a form of almost lifelong indentured servitude, if they can get a job. If they can get a job. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars in debt, highly skilled, and yes, and in many cases, that's absolutely true, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and no possibility of getting the employment that they're trained for, that they're highly skilled for, because it can be done so much cheaper moving it to a country on the other side of the world. So there's a search for sort of rock bottom employment, and at the same time charging more and more here for what are the socially needed programs. You pay more for school and you get less, and that is absolutely no future. There are millions of people who are losing their homes in completely illegal foreclosures. And that's important too, to even look at the process by which banks are wholesale laying hold of people's homes, selling them right out from underneath them. It is a ruthless process. Not that capitalism hasn't always been a ruthless process. I mean, it was a basis of slavery and genocide of native people. It's not that it was ever went through a nice period. But today, this is a system in absolute collapse, decay, at a dead end, and it is sucking everything. Now, that by itself would be a tragic tale and totally demoralizing if it were happening unchallenged. But there's a real challenge coming. There's a real challenge happening. You can see it happening, and you can also see the future by looking at Greece today. What do they want Greece to do? Really, what are the European banks, and the US putting a great deal of pressure also, by the way, on the EU, also telling them the same thing, get it in line. And the Greek workers are saying, no, we refuse. One deal after another has been imposed in Greece and Italy and all different countries, gutting social programs, selling out from underneath the population everything. I mean, in Greece today, their entire islands are up for sale, literally, along with workers, pension funds, health system, and a great many other programs that were people have an absolute right to. See, this is also the question that it's important to look at, and important to recognize why it's so important that there's a challenge happening. People have a right to a job, a right to health care, a right to housing. Why do we assert these things are rights? At an earlier stage in history, maybe they weren't, because the society was unable to provide for it. But today, they're absolutely a right, because we live in a society that has an abundance, such a massive abundance that it is why capitalism is at collapse. Because almost as soon as the system starts up again, that superabundance of technology comes into play and immediately produces more than could ever be purchased back. That's why it's at a dead end. That's really the problem. If they can't sell it at a profit, they just shut it down. And so you have machinery, equipment, technology that can produce enormous surpluses, so big it's unable to be bought back, and it goes again into a cycle of collapse. Now, this system and the collapse that it's facing, and the demand that the government be used to bail out the banks without any consideration whatsoever to people's needs is coming right up against people saying we have a right to housing, health care, jobs, training, skills, cultural life, everything that this society could provide, has the ability to provide, could provide for the entire planet. We're not just talking about people here in the US. There is the ability of technology today to produce for the entire planet. And yet poverty is greater than at any time in human history. We're talking about almost half the planet who is literally food insecure. That means they don't know what next day or next week's meals are coming from, if they can provide for their family. The level of insecurity is actually greater than in any earlier societies. You could look back to hunting and gathering societies, and yet you look at half the world living in complete insecurity, and a great deal of the rest of the world also very insecure. Very insecure meaning that most workers today are just a few weeks away from knowing if they're laid off, they're just literally weeks away from losing everything, losing car, losing home, losing the ability to provide for families. You have a system of unemployment compensation, which they now said it's 99 weeks. The latest figures are actually more people who are unemployed, who are not receiving unemployment compensation. They're no longer counted. They're no longer counted. And those who are receiving unemployment compensation, it goes down with each cycle, the amount you receive until you're totally cut off. So you're really talking about millions and millions of people who are insecure about their future and willing, interested, and looking to take more drastic, dramatic, confrontational, and determined action about it. And the Occupy Wall Street is the first wave of that happening. And I think it very much will there are going to be other waves, other efforts, other kinds of struggles taking hold in many, many ways. It's not just an Occupy at Wall Street. You look at the meetings happening in Harlem and Brooklyn and the Bronx. People in Harlem occupying a boiler room, saying we're not moving unless the city comes and repairs the heat in this building. All kinds of actions that are underway. Confronting the New York Police Department on what were absolutely standard operating procedures, stop and frisk of Black and Latino youth, just absolutely considered standard operating procedure for the police. And it is being challenged along with the mass arrests at Wall Street. Now that's very important because it breaks down the isolation of those who are hit the hardest. You have a large Muslim population in New York that has faced now years, actually a decade since 9/11, of New York Police Department, NYPD policy of entrapment, of spying, of surveillance, of complete setups, totally illegal frame-ups, and for the first time challenging this in big marches, in meetings, in legal actions. That's also part of this change in the mood. So I was really hoping that tonight we could have some discussion of this. I want to touch it with one other point, though, because this isn't going unchallenged by that 1% that controls so much. Now take the U.S. drone wars that are going on. This is not only the declared wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan. Very important because the U.S. didn't prevail in either. They were absolutely disaster, and I think they'll find that Libya is also completely a disaster, although they've laid waste to the country. But now we find increasingly that there are just a whole series of undeclared wars where there's a constant monitoring of a population with these drones, and then assassination attacks that go on all over. I mean, we're true in Somalia and Sudan and Pakistan and Yemen, Uganda, Kenya, right. Who's being targeted? You have no way of knowing. Why they're being targeted, how many times these are completely innocent civilians, people in a car going from here to there, these wars will also absolutely lead to an unraveling of the entire social fabric and to a rage. We also should be just aware, and I don't know enough about, but I want to make a generalization that every new form of technology makes what existed before obsolete. So here you have these huge U.S. aircraft carriers, and these little drones, which any country could make and use with surveillance and use with missiles and whatnot. There's big changes happening that will also shake U.S. even military domination in ways that I think aren't taken into account yet. So you have an increased lawlessness, total international lawlessness, that is an attempt to reverse a disastrous situation that is an organized. It's a real effort to intimidate people again, to consciously sow fear. And that may not be what happens, because it might meet head on with this new spirit of resistance. And that would be a big, big change in the dynamics, because power stays in place as long as it's not questioned, as long as it's not confronted. And when it is, everything changes immediately, when people lose their fear. And part of that is what we can see beginning. I don't want to overstate what's happening with the Occupy Wall Street, or Occupy Oakland, or Occupy Boston, or Atlanta, or Chicago, or any of these occupations that are happening around the country. But it is a new period, and it also reflects what's happening in Europe, in the Middle East, where power, the absolute corrupt hold of power and privilege, is being challenged by millions of people. So hopefully that will be the basis of some of the discussion here tonight, and I really hope that folks here both comment and do questions and whatnot.
Many points to be discussed, to be challenged, etc. One of the first things is my question about the status of Greece.
Okay, Greece. Okay. All right, and there's also a hand back in the back here.
Oh, I was wondering,
Somebody have a
based on
pen?
your knowledge or your
Pen?
perspective, how you think power could effectively be questioned and challenged, like other than just occupying Wall Street. That's a visual aesthetic maybe, but it's not a functional aesthetic yet.
Right.
And so how can people take the initiative to actually get things done, And one of the largest corporate strongholds that is preventing society from flourishing and progressing on a technological level is the oil and automobile industry, where they have the technology and the patents. They bought out the rights to the patents for other forms of technology that can mobilize vehicles. they have the power, the right, the authority, so they believe, to be the only person to profit from this concept, but they're not done milking the cow dry of oil. And that's such a huge industry. But anyways, how do you think people can effectively not only question, but like effectively empower those with power?
Okay. Well, actually, that does very much connect in with Greece. I think the biggest step, and what's going on in Greece, is a refusal to accept the austerity plan that is being demanded, and that is the most important step, because every time. Every deal that was imposed, a month would go by, and then there was still another concession that was being proposed, and that would be accepted by this terrible Papandreou government, who, social democracy in office, you would think would have a little bit of spine, but has made one concession after another, being told that otherwise you face bankruptcy. And it's really the Greek workers who are increasingly challenging that and refusing to go along with it. And then there's another acceptance by the government, and lo and behold, a month later, more instability and more is required, and more is required. And there's no way of even knowing how much or what the deal is at this point. So sometimes the most important step is to begin to challenge and to refuse to go along with the plan. That is like the number one. Now, how that projects right away into a concrete plan, well, it will in this way. Until now, no matter what happened in any social movement, we were immediately told, well, this has to either be channeled into the Republican or Democratic Party. I mean, that's it. You get a choice. And the choice is no choice. All of politics in the U.S. gets channeled into this ridiculous straitjacket, and you have a Democratic administration that is doing not much different than what Bush did. A big social step forward in the Obama presidency, but the institutions are the same, regardless of who is the president. And what they do, what they're demanding of people is the same. So sort of thinking outside the box, the straitjacket of the electoral system, and people taking direct action of all different kinds is extremely important. The big challenge will be, can this Occupy movement grow? In other words, if workers are going to be laid off from a plant, what should they do? Occupy. If a hospital is going to be closed, what should both the workers there and the whole community think about doing? Occupy. Refuse to go along with it. Challenge it. And not just signing a petition. We have to change the terms of the debate, so to speak, in a very profound way. They're about to lay off more than 250,000 postal workers. Amazing. And they've done it by a sleight of hand in an act of legislation that demanded that the post office pay into pension 75 years into the future for workers that are not yet born in a workforce that doesn't yet exist. And as soon as they passed that legislation, then of course the post office looked bankrupt, because this enormous amount had to be put into a pension fund for non-existent workers, and the only way to do that was to lay off tens of thousands, a couple 100,000 postal workers right here and now.
Well, that
And
sabotages our country. And
completely.
It's completely absurd.
It's totally, see, that's it. The absurdity of what is being proposed at every step is, there is no rationality to it. There is no...
The internet has made the post office not as vital.
Well,
Infrastructure is so vital.
What's
No.
Infrastructure is so vital.
the infrastructure...
I mean,
No,
my dad was a contractor. He used to do jobs for the post office, so I'm very aware of the U.S. Post Office. If people aren't mailing letters, but they're sending emails, that has implications. I don't think people need jobs. They need equity into the technology. Is there any cause of action to go along with
Well, they need...
to go to court and to be sued?
They need both things, because the post office provides all kinds of things and could provide far more, and in other countries does provide far more. And a lot of that has been privatized. I mean, what is UPS and FedEx and all of that all about? It is privatized services doing what used to be part of the post office at more than 2.5 times the price.
And people think they have constitutional protection, and they don't, because it's private.
Exactly.
They throw
And non-union.
$5 for a postage stamp that used to go into the dead mail.
Right. No, this is absolutely true. So it is making a very vital part of the infrastructure obsolete, and convincing us that we have no need for this, and we have no need for highly skilled workers that did this work. And yet that is communication in all kinds of ways in the society is what it's all about.
But for example, who's the highly skilled worker in the post office? The infrastructure that you're talking about.
That sorting of mail, for example, that sorting of mail is an extremely complex process. And it's computerized, and now a great amount of it actually has been privatized and is being done overseas. There are workers here who feed it into a machine, and it gets scanned and read and sorted mechanically in another country by a private firm and not by workers here. Yeah, no, it's absolutely insane, and it is...
Outside
That's right.
contracting.
Outside contractors, absolutely, is taking more and more of the post office work. And this is true...
Carol itself?
Well, part of destruction of unionized work on a very conscious way that is happening in this country, and this is in every single field, but especially government employees are being increasingly privatized. Now, private workers...
That's oxymoron.
Yes, it is. I didn't say anything of capitalism was rational.
Doesn't that sound like Rome?
It's treason.
Outsourcing
Yes, yes.
everything?
It's outsourcing everything. And it means that the services that we get, I mean, what is happening in education with charter schools? I mean, what are charter schools? Who are the biggest investors in charter schools is hedge funds. I mean, think about that for a minute. Has nothing to do with education. But if you can privatize, and here is a source of public money, how to lay hold of it, get rid of unionized, stable workers, and privatize it, and convince people that they're going to get better education out of it. And it's an absolute...
Is there a huge program to get rid of unions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's been in place, a program to get rid of unions.
Sort of
Yes.
Reagan when he shot
Absolutely.
the
Patco.
air traffic controllers.
Right. Right here.
But Sarah, first of all, I want to thank Howard for inviting us here this evening, especially myself coming from Brooklyn, and the honor and pleasure to meet you, because I was reading your bio and I was reading the many things that you have done and how you've organized for many years. And one of the things that, you were talking about tonight, like how people they get angry now. And I've been angry for a while, okay?
Good.
And because I've been angry for a while, I decided to do something about it. Because I know directly when it affects America, it really affects the African American community twice as bad. And you talked about some things about the institutions, and that's what troubles me the most, is the ignorance, the lack of knowledge people have about these institutions, because they don't have the ability to come and get the education that they need. So therefore, they don't use the power that they have in order to change the country. Okay, the power's in the vote. We all know that, right? And okay, we got Barack Obama is elected the first African American president of the United States. But then when it came to the other elections, when it came to Congress and House of Representatives, they didn't come out to vote. Okay, so we lost the Congress seats, and we lost the jobs bill, and we lost the infrastructure bills, and all these other bills that could have made some type of change in this country. Okay, and so as you know, a member of a producer family such as ourselves, the ACAP and ACORN, I decided to take on to do something. And what I'm trying to do now is to organize and get a coalition and work with you, you to let our voices be heard through the media. Now, Barack Obama is such an intelligent man, and he's been given money by everybody around the world. Okay, and he has over $700 billion that he has for his re-election campaign. And here we are struggling producers with venues for our voices to be heard around the world, okay? Live streaming as we're doing today, and we have all these many television shows. And my thing is that we really need to think, because I'm doing it anyway, because I'm doing it in my borough, but I want to do it surround the boroughs and then around the country, is to use the voice of our public access to educate the people, the young, the old, the up and coming, about the political process and how important it is for us to utilize our votes and utilize the things that we have, because the institutions are undermining us so badly. Through the foster care systems, through the prison systems,
We've lost faith in our government, and Obama, and Clinton and Bush. These people, they're just to sell out to this corporate military-industrial complex.
Okay, but the thing is, I feel like we have to make the impact where we can. We have to use the power that we have. Okay?
Absolutely.
And that's how he became president. Let me tell you something. He was a young African-American man, and in order to beat Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, he had to, that's a hell of a game to outwin to become president of the United States. So he used the power that he had. He owned his power. He became educated. He married a beautiful woman that was educated, and he took on the course of organizing and making and getting coalitions around the country. Young people, those same young people that are out there occupying Wall Street, are young people that have the time that they can sleep out there all night. They don't have kids that they have to run home to. They don't have grandchildren they have to run home to. Because, well, most of them don't. Most of them don't. I mean, I can look and tell most of them don't, because they're young. They're a lot younger than we are. And but now what it's doing is taking on hopefully it'll take on a bigger life of its own, where myself as an older person will get out there and stay all night and hang out with them and give them some direction, some demands that you say that need to be made. But in order for the demands to be made, we also have to get the revenue circulating in our circle of community producers so that we can let our voices be heard.
Right on.
You understand? Because, it takes money to make television. It takes money to run around the city with a camera and run up and down the streets. It takes money to do things, period. You know what I mean? To educate. We need education for the institutions to be changed so that we can make some new institutions. So anyway, I'm coming here tonight as looking to you as a mentor, so to speak, because you've done it before. Because I want to organize. I want a coalition of producers that we can send something to the Barack Obama people and say, give us X amount of dollars, and we've done this, and this already, and this is what we can continue to do. Because if we lose this vote in 2012, I don't know where the hell we're going to go after this. If we can't get those seats back in Congress, you talk about unions being dismantled and all these other things, the Medicaid and the Social Security, they're going to take it right from under us.
But everything Obama did was let executive fiat. He didn't need the Congress. If you know legalese, you understand what
He needs the Congress now.
All of the voters control 3 electoral votes because we're all citizens of a corporation called the United States of America, domiciled in 12 square miles. That's why all of the voters control 3 electoral votes. So what they're doing in Congress is just a distraction. What Obama did, he didn't need the Congress for him to do what he did.
What did he do?
And he screwed a lot of people.
When you say do what he did, what do you mean do what he did?
He listed all this stuff that he did, and he didn't do it with Congress cooperating. So the powers...
Bomb Afghanistan, Iraq, bail out the banks, not the people, not live by time, etc.
Well, here, let me just...
This is the thing. Everybody has opinions, right? We can sit here and debate this from now until forever, okay? But what I do know is that as an African-American mother and woman that's unemployed, I still have food to put on my table. Now, I don't know if I'm gonna have food next week or in the next couple of years, okay? And I know that food would have not been put there had he not been president. Because see, I've worked all my life, okay, over 30-something years. And when we became unemployed, it was 6 months on unemployment and then you went to welfare. Okay? So bailing out these banks that don't want to give money back now and saving the Detroit car industry and things that he did, I don't know how good or bad they are, but I'm talking about when it comes down to the practical putting food on my table and the basics of people getting an education and taking away the right for a mother to send her child to college and get an education. Those are things my ancestors fought for all their lives.
Exactly.
So if we could just get a jobs bill passed and an Pell Grant bill passed, and we can get unemployment until the country turns around, then that's what I want to fight for. Okay.
Well, I think this is a very important, because you're getting right to it. See, unless there are demands put forth for the things people have a right to, it's just take. And it doesn't matter who is president. I mean, it matters to us in the real sense of the word, but I mean, a president alone, regardless of who, no matter how bright or good or forward-thinking or not they are, is as long as the institutions are completely run for the benefit of the banks, then there's nothing coming our way. And it's only when there are absolute demands made that shake the system to its root that we're going to get anything at all. But in the long term, I think it's also got to be to get rid of this system, because it is a killer system. Right. So you need to have a long time plan. But you also really have to say, look, unless we organize to put forth real demands for a massive jobs program, it took, in the 1930s, Roosevelt provided the jobs program, not because he was a good guy, he was a member of the ruling class. They thought otherwise there was an absolute revolution coming. And it was fear. It was fear that caused them to create the WPA that provided millions and millions of jobs. And jobs really at union wages, jobs that were at the standard at that time. Now, at this point, and it is recognizing, though, that these institutions have become more and more strictly to serve the banks, and that the government itself, now Obama could pass any of this by fiat. He could literally stop by executive order. He could stop the foreclosures that are going on by executive order. He could, but it's only going to happen if there's absolute fear that the whole system is going to flip over without. So
That is actually, they're afraid of.
Pardon? Well, they're not afraid of it yet. They're not afraid of it yet. The only thing that is, it's an important point that you raise about Occupy Wall Street. This started out as a movement that was overwhelmingly both young and white and people who were historically in a much better off situation. Suddenly looking at a situation that for Black and Latino population, that's been the reality for decades. That has been the reality. Suddenly, though, they're facing what was a new reality of a future of unemployment, of indebtedness, of losing homes, and they were most able to pick up a certain fight. That's important to know, too, that the police, while there was repression and action, it might have been entirely different if this was Black youth down at Wall Street. That's just a fact. That's the racism of this system. So, but it's opened up a venue. It's opened up a possibility, and it's really how to take advantage of it, right. But also not have the expectation. Now, the Obama administration has $700 to $800 million. They expect to have $1 billion to run for re-election. That's money that the banks and corporations are giving him. It's not money that is coming back to us. It is to keep a two-party system that takes and takes and takes more and more. And although he was elected by a real people's movement, I mean, that's really what did it. There were millions and millions, particularly of young people, who worked heart and soul on that campaign and turned out the vote en masse. But will they do it again if they don't feel they got anything from it? That's a real question. It's a real...
Well, I know they need all the help they can get right now.
Who are they?
Pardon?
You keep talking about they.
Well, that's what's also, I think, been important about the Occupy Wall Street. For the first time, rather than it being a vague they talk about the 1%. The 1%. The 1%
who... do we know who is the 1%?
Well, they're talking about the billionaires. CEOs. They're talking about the banks. Well, the names are the names are irrelevant because it's not going after one person. It's going after a system that can provide a 400 and almost 1,000% increase in wealth in a few years' time for the 1%. At a time when then about 80 some population.
How do I get to enter into this process?
Well, there are lots of 1% wannabes. Let me just say, but the wannabes aren't going to get there by wishing.
A key word that I think could solve a lot of this, and it's called transparency. We have to really salute Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, the idea of dismantling fear. Basically, human reality is motivated by love or fear. And the Pentagon is based on fear and paranoia, right. So they never have enough money and never enough war, because they're afraid of the enemy. And the occupiers and the people believe that we're all brothers and sisters. It's like the old ancestral tribal sense that we are one clan, one community, we work together. The world is one. And so transparency and web streaming through the boardrooms and the accountability is the key to an authentic democracy and honesty. You know, in any business, the shady deal, you know, they just sort of they make extra money and no one knows about it. And they rip people off. When you increase your profits 10, 20, or 100 points, no one knows. You know, and that's okay. It's all right to make a profit and make money, but I'm just saying, transparency is our magic word, and that's what we should suggest. Maybe you could suggest to these to the people to make demands that we want much more just, not to be live in fear.
Right.
Well, you said that
Right, that's
they have all of this money for the campaign, but the money's not for us.
right.
I don't mean for us per se as much as I mean for us per se, meaning us to educate, us to help them get more votes if it's for the campaign.
But
I can tell you,
campaigns are bamboozle.
the campaigns,
Left or right, Republican or
Okay.
Democrat, it's a smoke and mirror shell game.
But when you say smoke and mirror games, this is where I have a problem with, right? Because when you see the layout, right, you see X amount of red numbers, and when you see them outvote the Senate on a bill that we need passed, that is an education bill or a jobs bill, and the Congress won't vote in favor of it, then there's something wrong with that picture. Because if it was more blue seats in that red chart, and they all voted, because I know some of the Democrats didn't vote either, because we still have those people down in Mississippi and Alabama that went with the Republicans, okay? Now, I could say a People's Party, but I'm not talking about People's Party now. I'm talking about what's in front of us right now is the Democrats and the Republicans, right?
Well-
So if we can if we could use our voting power to change those electoral votes and those red votes, then we could get some of these bills passed.
well, okay, just the way the system is set up now. When Obama came into office, they had both the presidency and the majority in both houses of Congress.
Exactly. My point.
And not one improvement came our way. Not one. There was both houses of Congress and the
But what do you mean
presidency.
it wasn't no improvement? He did pass the health care bill that
Well,
helped some people. I mean, let me tell you, this is another thing when people talk about Obama that really gets me annoyed because he's
I'm saying
one
it's
man.
not exactly.
No,
That's
but I'm
exactly
saying
it.
He's one man,
It's-
right?
right.
He's one man amongst all of these rich white people out
Right,
there
right.
that are being paid by lobbyists and everything out there in the system, okay? They don't even have a clue about what's going on in the grassroots, okay? They're getting all these thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to vote the way they tell them to vote. You do what I tell you to. All companies tell them, you do what I tell you to do. So he's one man, and what he tried to do is he tried to give us universal health care. He tried to do all these great things for us, and they told him no way.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
They
That's
said no
that.
way.
I agree.
And
That's the point.
as a smart street person, he said, okay, well, we can't do it all the way. Well, give me some of the things, because my people are hurting.
Right.
The people in the grassroots are hurting. Give us something. I'll take something rather than nothing. Because
Right.
a bird in the hand is better than none in the bush. Okay? And people are killing him because he had to make that compromise. But that compromise actually put food on the tables of people and kept those car companies open, Chrysler and other companies open, and kept the kids in school and lowered and let them go to school for training, job training. I work with kids right now and adults, not just kids. I'm talking about grown adults that are going back to school and getting some type of training so they can be marketable. That wasn't happening in the Bush administration at all, period.
Well, I'm not in any way defending Bush.
He's intelligent and sexy and a change of Bush, but Guantanamo's still open and the prison industrial complex of slave labor has increased and legislation against us and carte blanche for the CEOs and the banks to do what they want, the corporations to run amok. It's just gone from bad to worse.
And you're right, and the reason that I think it went from bad to worse is because of one of the reasons is the institutions that we're dealing with.
Exactly.
And secondly, of the ignorance of the people out there. Young people are so turned off by the government and the systems of this country that they don't even think that their vote counts.
Well, that's it. That's it. Their vote
Well, I believe
and
it
the
counts. Because if it didn't count, then I dare to say that my ancestors would have not been trying to vote or stand on a line to vote and be beat and whipped and had hoses put on them and dogs, German shepherds brought to them to kill them if it didn't count. It has to count for something. There has to be a power in the community of these votes. It has to be.
Well, you would hope so, but I campaigned for Cynthia McKinney. I got lots of signatures and we tried, but her emails were blocked. Yahoo, there's a censorship. She's a third-party candidate.
Okay.
And since she's for 9/11 truth and bring the troops home and speaking truth as a former congresswoman, an intelligent person who's really speaking the deal instead of Obama's bamboozle, she had not a snowball's chance in hell to get over. It's a Republican Democrat smoke and mirrors game.
Okay, so what do we do? What do you suggest we do then?
I don't know, but I'll salute President Obama as my president, but I know he's not really my president.
What?
He's just part of this game, the shell game.
So who was Bush for 8 years?
Well, he's still the same. Guantanamo's open, Iraq is being tortured, and Afghanistan is being bombed.
And who was
Okay,
Biden
all
for
right,
8
so
years?
let's just, because
That
this
so
is, okay,
insulting
wait a minute,
insult.
because
We
this
don't
is,
say that.
this is, just let's back up in the discussion because you're raising important points here. The problem today is that the institutions of corporate power and the banks completely have taken over the system in every single way. And unless there is a struggle of the people themselves against these institutions, the electoral system, regardless of who's elected president, regardless of how wonderful and how important, because the last election was very important, given a history, 200 years of racism and slavery, genocide in this country, that was absolutely a historic election. But it's also a good example of whether both houses of Congress and the presidency, the bailout still went to the banks. So that is a lesson to the population here, that the change has to be on a much, much more profound level. Now, you raised the media. There are all kinds of things that are possible with media today that in an earlier period were not. That doesn't mean they won't attempt to block us. That doesn't mean they won't attempt to shut down websites and stop email from going through and all of that. In an earlier era, it took only the millionaires could own media. That's absolutely true.
That's right.
And today, and it is what's given Occupy Wall Street, it's what's given all these new movements a great deal of power, is that there are literally thousands of kids out there with little cameras that put stuff up immediately, and it changes the equation. It doesn't do it overnight, but there are new forms of technology that can grow the people's power. It's not the end of the story, it's not the whole story, but the possibilities around the world, even for people to talk to each other and learn from each other. The idea that we could learn from Tahrir Square in Egypt, from what's happening in Athens, from what's happening in Rome, and within weeks and months use some of the same tactics here, that is because through the media we literally can talk to each other in real time, that if there is a police attack and people are mobilized, they can respond right away. They don't hear about it 2 months later. So it's challenging us. Can we find more and more ways to think outside the box, because some of this new technology takes it out of the hands of those who've always had the power. They have it more concentrated now, they are more isolated, and there is therefore a great deal of potential if we're more acutely aware of it, and I think trying to make revolutionary challenges with it. Trying not